7 o'clock Israel time. So good evening, Israel, and good morning in the United States. And thank you all for joining us. My name is Limona Carr-Vincent, and I work for the Bird Foundation, which promotes and funds collaboration between Israeli and American companies. Together with our partner, Ignite the Spark, the vibrant energy community in Israel, we gather here with innovation R&D and managers at leading utilities to discuss how they spark and sustain innovation. Before our panel discussion, I would like to introduce my colleague, Ms. Andrea Yona, to share with you an important information about the Bird Energy Program and how you can receive funding to foster the development of clean energy technologies through US-Israel collaboration. Andrea, the screen is yours.
Okay. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Andrea Yona. I represent the Bird Foundation here in the United States. I happen to be in New Jersey. I have two other colleagues who I believe are joining us in California and in Texas here in the United States. So BIRD, what is BIRD? BIRD is an acronym by National Industrial Research and Development. In this case, we're focusing on our program called Bird Energy. BIRD is a federally funded R&D program between the United States and Israel. It started, the general BIRD started back in 1977, so we've been around quite some time. This is a fund that was created jointly by both governments, with each, the general BIRD, with each putting in 50% of the money to create a $110 million endowment fund. And that funding is used to promote innovation and collaboration between US and Israeli companies that are developing technologies to be commercialized. We've been doing it successfully in many, many different industries, everything, in fact, with the exception of military specific applications for many years. From that $110 million, we've now already granted over $370 million, approving more than 1,000 projects. In repayments to our fund, because this is a recoverable grant, we're now at over the initial 110 million, at 113 million just in repayments. But most importantly, $10 billion that have been generated either directly or indirectly from the projects that we funded. So a lot of economic development for both countries through BIRD. What do we do? BIRD invests up to 50% of the funding into a joint project between a US and an Israeli company. It's really cost share or a risk sharing program where the governments are putting in 50% and each of the two partners are putting in 50% cost share towards their development of the project. It's what we call a conditional grant, meaning that if the project is successful and achieves revenue, there is a repayment to the Bird Foundation. However, it is non-dilutive. We're not taking any equity. We're not taking any IP interest in the technologies. So it's really the repayment is more as a royalty to us. It's a fund where that money goes back in to invest in other projects, so like a revolving, so it's a revolving fund. But if the project is not successful, if there is no repayment, then there is no repayment at all. So only if there's revenue generated are we requesting repayment. So we're here today to talk about one of our newer programs, which is called Bird Energy. This is additional funding that was appropriated by the two governments specifically for projects relating to alternative renewable energy, energy efficiency, water energy nexus, a host of different topics under the energy title. It's the actual Bird Energy program started in 2007 through the US-Israel Cooperation Act as part of the Energy Independence and Security Act that that year. And the stakeholders are the DOE on the US side and the Ministry of Energy and Israel Innovation Authority on the Israeli side. And they review the projects along with our board and also select the projects. So as I said, this is how BIRD works. 2 companies putting in up to 50% towards their cost share. We're providing the other 50%. If it succeeds, repayment. No success, no repayment. BIRD Energy, we just put out a call for proposals. The difference between BIRD Energy and the general BIRD is that we will accept a university to partner with a company. And the general BIRD, it does need to be 2 companies. But in this case, any university can partner with a company. The process is the same regarding the cost share. The BIRD Energy is looking for, like I said, projects on all different topics: solar, wind, advanced vehicle technologies, alternative fuels, smart grid, storage, water energy nexus, advanced manufacturing, AI for energy management, and others. Also natural gas and associated technologies. Our next cycle will start on June 30th with the submission of an executive summary. As part of what we offer at BIRD, we help with the matchmaking process. So we help introduce Israeli companies to US companies to Israeli companies. We also help them as they structure their project. We review drafts of their executive summaries and help them throughout the submission process and after for those that are approved. So after the companies will submit the executive summary on June 30th, we'll review them, give them a recommendation if they should move forward in the process. The final full-scale proposal will be submitted to us on August 13th. And our board will get together to select the winning grantees in October of 2021. So as I said, this is the same as our regular BIRD with the exception that a university can participate with a company. So what are we looking for in these projects? So first, we want to see innovation. These are very innovative technologies, and because we're willing to share in the risk, innovation and risky projects are something that we're interested in. We want to see good synergy between the companies. What does that mean? This is typically complementary technologies or one company with a new technology or prototype and able to work with, in this case, for the purposes of this panel, a utility to pilot those technologies or other types of integrations. We want to see that companies can demonstrate a good market opportunity. And finally, that they have a sound commercialization strategy, a way of getting to market, commercializing and selling their products. This is the timetable, as I said, June 30th, August full-scale proposal, and we'll be selecting the projects in October. They'll be evaluated between September, October by the DOE and the Israeli Ministry of Energy. Finally, for those projects that are approved, they have a few months to kind of sign their company-to-company agreements, an agreement they sign with the BIRD Foundation, and then they get an advance on the funding. And then every 6 months, submit to us financial and milestone reports. And at the end of the project, there's we do an audit. Every year after that, they send us sales reports and repayments are based on those. Why do companies come to us for this funding? So it's $1 million. So $1 million is a lot, but not often for large companies. And we have many of them that have submitted proposals to us. So number one, surprisingly, even for large companies, funding is important. They also like the risk sharing mechanism where the governments are willing to share in the risk along with them. The validation or the stamp of approval is very important, especially to startup companies who can use that stamp of approval to go out and raise additional funding that they may need for their matching funds. And finally, the commitment that allows these projects to accelerate faster than perhaps they normally would were it not for the support that BIRD can provide. So just to give you an idea, these were the projects that were approved in Bird Energy last year in 2020. This is an annual cycle. So just to give you an idea of the range of different projects, everything from battery technologies to materials and membranes, Internet of Things types of projects, and different types of heat and power solutions. As a result of Bird Energy, as I said before, a lot of funding is raised by companies. So we did an economic impact study, and we're able to see that since 2009, specific just to this program, $733 million was raised in 130 funding rounds from the companies that received the funding from us. And this actually was highest in 2019. But this was an interesting impact of our program. So that is all for me. I want to save most of the time for our panelists. We're very proud of the projects that we have with major utilities. Definitely want to encourage more and want to understand a little bit about what utilities are looking for, what types of partnerships. I will pass this back over to Limor and would welcome any questions that anybody has, either through text or at the end of the program. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Andrea. And by the way, this webinar is recorded and we will post it on our website, so you'll be able to see it. Andrea, if you can take off the slide so we can, excellent, okay. I'm delighted to introduce my partners for this webinar today. It's Via Baron, who is the head of the innovation at the Israel Electric Corporation, Patrick Crossley, manager of the R&D innovation at Southern Company, Ellen Ettlinger, who is a Senior Director, Research, Technology Development and Innovation at NYPA, the New York Power Authority, and Kara Fuller, who is the Innovation Program Manager at the Florida Power and Light. Thank you all for coming over tonight. As we all know, utilities are facing pressing issues and are required to embrace emerging technologies and the opportunities that they present while obligated to meet regulatory requirements and service a designated territory. I think we'll start with Svea from IEC. Can you tell us about the pilot program the Israel Electric Corporation has done with companies, how companies can participate in this program, what is the internal process of selecting companies to work with you, and obviously if this pilot program is also open for international companies.
First of all, thank you very much. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because we had some technical difficulties at the beginning. So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm really excited because I started exploring the Bird Earth as an entrepreneur, became an evaluator, and suddenly I'm representing utilities. So this is a closure to me. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here today. Okay, IEC, Israel Electric Corporation, is Israel main and almost only provider here in Israel. As a provider, it is the only provider, but it is not the only generator. And so up until 2020, January 2020, although there was innovation within the company, there was no discipline called innovation within the company. And so at the beginning of 2020, actually a new division was formed at IEC, which is called Strategy, Innovation and Restructuring process. And I became head of innovation within IEC. And since then, we have started working with startup companies regularly. Now, you have to understand, for our American participants, IEC is 100% state-owned company, which means that the regular regulation that utilities have to deal with is even well, wider, bigger, whatever you choose to take. So we cannot really, well, we can invest in companies, but this is a very long way. And so we have started Power Up. Power Up is our pilot and POC program for startup companies. I must admit that in 2020, although we have worked with 48 technology companies, most of them startup companies, none of them was international. However, this is going to change, I hope, very soon with the help of the Birds Energy program. We'll see about that. But first of all, international companies are very welcome to apply. And we've got lots of details in our website. We can put it in the chat later on for interested companies to look for it. We have a call for companies in our website, and we have the regular funnel every big corporate has. We're looking into solutions, trying to fit them with challenges. We have a judging committee, and if this works out, we start working with usually a startup company. What's in it for us, obviously, and your technology? What's in it for our startups? Well, first of all, as I said, we put in resources. We give our grid, obviously. So actually, you work in a sandbox. And you also get our expertise and the funds. We pay for the projects and pilots that we do, and I know that well, I'm not saying it's not a common practice, but well, in some corporates you see a different strategy. We don't take equity, and this is a very important thing. Yes.
Thank you, Tzvia. So I want to move to Patrick with your permission. Patrick, can you share with us some information about the Southern Company's top priorities in advancing innovation and your role within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, if you're not familiar with Southern Company, we are a leading energy company. We serve 9 million customers through subsidiaries in regulated electric utilities in 3 states. As well as a nuclear operating company that operates within that same footprint. And then we have a gas distribution company that operates in 4 states, as well as competitive wholesale energy, a leading distributed energy company. So I guess the takeaway here is that there's not a singular interest, is that Southern Company has a broad operating area, operating in both the gas distribution side as well as the electric energy side. We don't see ourselves as an electric utility or even a power company necessarily, but we see ourselves as a provider of energy solutions. And as from an environmental standpoint, as we continue to try to find our way toward a net zero future and enabling technologies that will help us get there, Southern Company's main technology interests are in deploying generation assets that can help us reach a more sustainable environmental position and sustainable economy. And then as well as growing our influence in the energy business by being able to grow our offerings in these areas of distributed generation and a more flexible grid and all the things that come with that. So as the energy sector becomes more complicated and there becomes a need to have deeper penetration of renewables and distributed assets, the management of those that falls to the utility company becomes increasingly complex. So things like demand management and managing peaks and figuring out how energy storage and forecasting of demand fits into the overall profile just makes our job more and more complicated. So I wouldn't say that we have singular technology focus areas, but we're focused really from a strategic standpoint on kind of 4 core areas, which would be our of course, low carbon, sustainable, flexible, resilient generation technologies. The second would be support of our existing fleet. So that's achieving cost reduction through, again, improved flexibility and efficiency. The next piece is providing reliability and resiliency to our customer through making sure that not only the generating assets, but also the grid have the appropriate level of reliability and resiliency, and then supporting customer needs holistically. And again, that's not just energy needs, but as we continue to try to advance the sustainability of our business, not only do we have to support the customer's energy needs, but we've also got to support the customer's sustainability and carbon goals as well.
Thank you. Ellen, how does NYPA build its partnership with the industry? Is there a specific formula that you have developed? And what are NYPA's also main topics of interest? Trying to unmute. No, you think you're muted.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. So, well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to speak today. So the Power Authority is always looking at new technologies. We are, in fact, as we speak, finalizing a NYPA Israel Challenge that was announced by Governor Cuomo in his visit 2 years ago, which was postponed due to COVID. But we look at companies that are new, have new technologies. There's something called a technology readiness level, which the Department of Energy has kind of established as the range of technologies, everything from an idea in somebody's dream to ready to make money. And we're looking at that sweet gap between TRL level 3 and level 6, which means the idea is conceptualized, it's ready for lab work, or the lab work has started, and the technology company is looking to test it out in a real market. So the Power Authority is, for those of you who don't know, is the largest state utility in the United States. We have 25% of the electricity in New York State is generated by us, and we own around a third of the transmission line in New York State. We also act as the conduit from Canada, which has a lot of hydropower down into the United States. Most of our plants, in fact, all of our plants are either hydroelectric or natural gas. So we have developed what's called a Vision 2030. In New York State, there is something called the Climate Leadership and Community Act, which is a goal of New York State to come to a carbon-free footprint by the year 2030. And our mission is to lead that trajectory to a carbon-free environment and ensure the economic viability of New York State. We are a state entity, and hence our interests go beyond just selling and generating and transmitting electricity, but it's also to help the state reach its energy goals. So our Vision 2030 is based on 6 principles. The first is to preserve and enhance the value of our hydropower assets. We own and operate the two major hydroelectric power plants, which is Niagara Falls and the St. Lawrence Power Project. We want to be a leading transmission developer, owner, and operator for New York State. And to that extent, we're getting involved in offshore wind products. We also want to pioneer decarbonization by acting as a test bed for innovation, which gets to the R&D and the technology startup companies we're interested in that I talked about before. We also want to partner with our customers to meet the state energy goals. And the Power Authority also owns the New York State Canal System. So part of our mission is to repurpose the canals for economic and recreational benefit of New Yorkers. So that kind of envelops who we are, what we are looking for, and where we intend to go.
Thank you, Ellen. Kara, you represent Florida Power and Lights, and I was wondering, we all know that it is estimated, I think, that 1 in 5 vehicles in the United States battery powered, at least by 2030, this is the estimation. And in Florida alone, electric vehicles ownership has increased, I think, about 300% since 2013, and making it basically the 4th largest EV state in the country. Can you share with us information about your activities, FPL activities in advancing EV technologies? Now you're engaged with startups within this area.
Absolutely. So NextEra Energy, our parent company, has a very large interest in electrification across the United States and North America. We started with a rollout of 1,300 chargers within the state of Florida. And then we had the problem of, well, how do you pay for that power? So then we rolled out a customer-facing application that our customers can go in and use to pay for their power. All of this took a bunch of collaboration with our ecosystem of accelerated startups, universities, research organizations, large companies like Ford and other vehicle manufacturers. And that led us to a bunch of really, really smart people and smart ideas, and some of which we later then invested or purchased, like our partners, EIQ. So this has created a completely new business opportunity in line for FPL and Nextera. So.
And I understand that you've been installing in the last year over 1,300 electric vehicle chargers just in Florida, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So that creates our Evolution network of chargers. So those chargers include a charge point. They include and various other manufacturers of EV chargers. I'm blanking on some of the other names. So the problem that created was, how do you put all of these different native ecosystems together into one platform that our customers within the state can connect to?
Very interesting. So Tzvia, I know in our previous discussions, we talked about that Israel Electric Corporation is working on developing and establishing a living lab in Israel. Can you tell us more? What is the living lab? And what exactly you're planning to do? What are your objectives in creating these labs? And what are you planning to do in the next year or so to make it happen?
Thank you. Yes. Well, this is a strategic project for us. And actually, this is going to be the first electricity-based living lab here in Israel. We're planning a living lab in the south of Israel. And in which, well, actually imagine what if you could put the future, you could have the future now from an energy point of view. And we are going to staff a neighborhood with all the new technologies that the energy transition can offer us, from obviously renewable energy, EVs, DERs, everything you could, storage, obviously, microgrids, and take all the data and see what we could do with it. For us, it would be a great test bed to see how everything works together. But it would also enable us to make this new smart electricity neighborhood. Well, this is obviously not the name, it's not a very good name, but it would allow us to take it and to offer it as some sort of a test bed for inhabitants who could become prosumers. This is not allowed in Israel yet, and we are planning to do so and to explore new business models. It would enable and allow academia, startup companies, and also partners. And we're looking for partnerships. Let me just add another sentence, if you may. IEC, as I said, is a state-owned company. That means that we've been an enclosed, a gated community, let's say, for 97 years. We are opening. We're looking for partnerships, both with utilities, startup companies, and academia. And we would like to share the data and the experience that we gain there with others.
Thank you. Ellen, NYPA, with your leadership, NYPA, with your leadership, has partnered with several Israeli companies and is heavily engaged with the industry here in Israel. In fact, I have to say that NYPA was awarded funding from the Bird Foundation for projects with two companies, one with Empress and now with Brand Miller. Can you elaborate more about this project and how NYPA has benefited from them.
Okay, so as you mentioned, we have two projects. One is with Imprest. I'm sure everybody's familiar. Imprest was the builder of the Raphael of the Iron Dome system, which is working very well now. But we were, I was in Israel a number of years ago, and we were at a industry meeting, and we started to talk with some of the companies about what they could offer to the Power Authority, in line with some of the things we talked about earlier. And one of the companies, which was Imprest, happened to ask, what is our pain point? What is the one thing that we really are struggling with? And at that time, it was our transformer monitoring system. We had two major transformer failures, which resulted in a cost of $5 million each of loss of equipment plus replacement power. So we really wanted to try to solve that problem. In discussions with Imprest, we identify that the technology that's being used today for the Iron Dome system is the same technology that we could use to monitor our transformers. We, over the last, I guess, 3 years or 4 years, have taken that, we've implemented it, and today all of the Power Authority's transformers, main transformers, are being protected, I would say, by the transformer control system, that monitoring system that Imprest developed. So it was an example of where we had a problem. There was a Israeli company that at least was in the energy business, was a startup. I mean, they were at that time heavy in defense, but they had not done anything in the energy business. And we came up with some innovative solutions and were able to implement it. And the same thing with Brenmiller. Brenmiller is a company that has developed a new type of thermal energy storage unit. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that New York State is very interested in is decarbonization, reducing the carbon footprint. And one of the ways to do that is through energy storage, taking that heat and transmitting it or converting it into electric power. The reason you want to do that is this way you could generate or use your electricity during periods of time when its electricity is cheap, and discharge it when energy or electricity is more expensive. So in both cases, both companies had the solutions that we were looking for. We worked very well together with them. We kind of lend our knowledge of the U.S. electric market and what the needs were, and both companies provided the innovative solutions to help them to solve our problems. And we found that with other companies. We've got about 4 or 5 other companies, Israeli companies, we're dealing with. Not done through the Bird Grant, but in each case, the companies provided technology solutions to issues that we were having.
Thank you, Alan. Kara, I know that FPL has different ways of working with industry partners. Can you please tell us about your work with the industry? I know you're working with international companies, with American-based companies. How are you working with them? I know you have an incubator and an investment arm. Can you maybe tell us more about it, and especially tell the companies who are here and presenting at the webinar how to get in touch with you? What would be the best way to do it? Oh, you're unmuted.
Try one more time. So we have 3 main ways for startups and accelerators and new companies, people with good tech, to get in touch with us and or involved with us. The first is we want to be customers of people with good ideas and good products. So that partnership can start off with a simple proof of concept, or it could start off with us saying, yeah, we like it, let's just roll it out. We've done that with a number of companies that we were their first major customer. So we're not afraid to work with startups as a customer. The second is applying to be part of our internal incubator. So we have a internal incubator called 35 Mules that we started at the beginning of last year. So they're just finishing up their first cohort, which I'm sure you can imagine was challenging during a pandemic, but they were very excited about the 6 companies that went through that initial program, and they'll be looking for cohort 2. I believe the applications are open now for that. So that's 35 Mules. I can provide the link in the chat after answering the rest of this question. And the third way is we do have venture capital opportunities. So we have an M&A group that does mergers, acquisitions, and cash infusions for companies that we think have large strategic value to our organization. So those are the 3 main ways that I know that we interact with startups. But I will tell you that my advice for getting involved with working with us is to be flexible. NextEra Energy is the largest energy company in the world and largest producer of wind and solar. So doing work with us can sometimes be doing work with Goliath, and you might be the David. It's not that we don't want to interact with you, but sometimes we are held back by our own bureaucratic nonsense. So the advice that I have with you with that is to be very flexible. If we're going to be spending a lot of money on something, we definitely want to have an opinion. I think that answers the question. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, Sarah, can you tell us more about the incubators and how can companies apply? What is the process? Sounds like a very interesting way of testing technologies and working closely with companies. And I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in participating.
Absolutely. So my group, we do proof of concepts and technology evaluations. So we will touch companies at all 3 aspects and 3 levels, but 35 Mules, I'll provide the link for the applications in the chat after I'm done answering, is our internal incubator. Right now, we just had 6 companies complete that. And they sit with us in our Juno Beach location, have access to leadership from all levels of the NextEra spectrum. So that's FPL, our energy services side of the house, our financing and trade floor side of the house, as well as our C-level executives for NextEra and its parent organization. They also provide an infusion of cash so that you can continue to do cool work, office resources, as well as access to our company data, resources, and research. So it's a huge opportunity if your product has some good strategic alignment, is a very promising innovation. It's a really cool organization.
Sound like a very good opportunities for the companies. I think you touched on it, Kara, but we all know that the cycle of working with large utilities can be quite, how shall I put it this way, can take a lot of time given the regulatory framework and the different organizations involved with making the decision. But I think this is questions for all of you. If you can provide us with some tips on how to engage with utility that you represent, and maybe also things to do or not to do based on your experience. And I know you have a lot of experience with working with the industry. So maybe Patrick, we'll start with you.
Sure. I would say, first of all, is the main takeaway for working with a Southern company, whether it be R&D or working with one of the Southern operating companies or even our new ventures investment arms, would be understanding where your technology fits in the innovation space, as well as understanding how to clearly articulate that value proposition. So what I mean by that is we talk about innovation as if it's only one thing, right? And in reality, innovation ranges from incremental innovation that might reduce cost of an existing process or improve the nature or the efficiency of that process. These would be, Alan mentioned technology readiness levels. These would be very high technology readiness levels of technologies. And then we also do work on the very conceptual, very low level of technology readiness, and often these are the more transformational technologies. So these are more next generation and transformational types of innovation. Neither end of this spectrum is inherently good or bad, but it does provide focus on what part of the organization you might work with. So if you just say, I want to work with Southern Company, well, we have like 30,000 employees, right? So it's very difficult to know which parts of the organization to engage with. If you're on the more incremental side, you would be better partnered with maybe some of the operating companies, maybe working directly with Alabama Power or with Georgia Power, or even with Power Secure, which is our distributed generation group. Groups that are in kind of the earlier stages and the lower levels of maturity, more conceptual in nature, would work more closely with groups like my group in research and development. And so I think articulating, what's the nature of your innovation, clearly illustrating what your value proposition is, and then, clearly identifying, I think it really goes along well with the BIRD evaluation criteria that Andrea mentioned initially, is that we want to understand what your plan for commercialization pathway is. That you may have a fantastic product with a great development plan and innovation plan, but if there's no way that I can uniquely help you bring your product to market or accelerate the commercialization of your product, then I'm not providing value. And so you really want to think about the partnership in terms of a two-way partnership. Of course, the utility companies are looking for opportunities to innovate and opportunities to create optionality, but we're also looking where we can uniquely fill a need that someone else can't fill. So that level of value proposition is important for both parties. And I would say one of the things that really helps us evaluate that is when technology partners are really clear and really transparent about what their technology risks are. I don't want to have to spend 6 months with one of my teams to evaluate a technology just so that we can understand what the weaknesses are that we have to fill. Like, you probably already know the weaknesses within your technology spaces. You know the technical gaps that you have to close. Be clear about that. Show us where we can help you, and show us where we can provide a perspective that might be valuable for you to answer some of those technology questions or to close some of the technology gaps. And so I think the critical thing there is transparency in the partnership, understanding where you can help each other, and understanding where your product or your technology falls within the overall value chain of your utility partner.
Thank you, Patrick. Alan, want to hear your opinion.
So we are again continuing to look at new technologies, and as I said before, we've got a roadmap for the states. We've got a roadmap for the Power Authority, and we know what the R&D group does. Really fits in nicely as far as that's concerned. We obviously want to be careful about what projects we select, but the guiding principles of guidance that we really work on is, does it solve a NYPA problem? Does it save NYPA money? Does it improve safety, improve operations, reduce maintenance? And as I said before, the key is where in the technology readiness level does that technology lie? We've found out very willing partners, eager partners in the Israeli companies, and without being repetitive, it's kind of all has been worked very nicely for us, worked very well for us. The people at BIRD have been really helpful, not only as a funding organization, but also helping to lead us through some of the issues that would typically come up. So other than that, that kind of, I guess, wraps everything up in a nice ribbon.
Thank you, Alan. Sfia, from the Israeli, the IC point of view, what are your thoughts? And what would make you work with companies?
first of all, I agree with all my colleagues. So, so thank you very much. Yes, be transparent. That's the most important part of it, and understand that even though we provide funds for startup companies, the most important thing that you can receive from us is our expertise, our grit, our understanding, and know-how of how electricity really works. Well, but this is on the one side. On the other side, well, we can learn from you. So even if you are in a very early stage, a TRL which is not suited for a pilot or even a POC, come and talk to us. Because if there is a need, if there is a challenge, usually it means that it is not only IEC's challenge, although we are a local company, but other utilities challenge as well. So
can I ask you a question, Tzvia? Because yes, I know that sometimes if you present a technology which is too much of an early stage for partners, for potential partners, you may have the risk of burning them in the process if you bring them too early to the game. So, you know, and obviously all of you are very busy people, and you are working and investigating and meeting with companies and reviewing a lot of websites. You know, so, you know, what is the right level where companies can approach you and expect for an engagement, and not just sharing the information about their innovation and you know, I always say educating the utilities, which is also sometimes they spend a lot of time educating the utilities. But I want to make sure that the companies will not burn themselves if they reach out to you in a very early stage.
Well, that depends, obviously. And that's a very good question, actually. Usually we'll take a TRL, which is at least 4, which means that the company is ready for a proof of concept. But sometimes, as I said before, and Dr. Avi Leon, who was nominated our R&D manager only last month, he's here, we are seeing a potential. And some companies have, let's say, a commercialized project or technology in one industry. If they feel that they would like to explore new ways or new opportunities with us, because in many times you could modify technologies from one industry to another, then there's no TRL is too early. You know what I mean? Because, okay, you've got a product, but still you need a few years, a couple of years to go until you have a fully commercialized product. We are ready for the quest together.
I think we're going to test you after this meeting. Kara, I want to bring you into this conversation, Kara. If you can tell us a little bit your own personal tips that you can give companies. We've been talking about that previously, and I know you've been reviewing a lot of websites, a lot of information. What's the best way for companies to reach out to you and engage in a constructive and productive conversation?
Absolutely. That's always a tough one. I can tell you that I get the most reach outs on LinkedIn for all of these cool technologies and cool companies. That's one of the major ways that I find out about new tech. And then the second most common way is through accelerators and our partners like the Bird Foundation. Every time I get on the phone with Limor and Andrea, we just spark on all of these cool companies and cool technology and things that we are hearing in the ecosystem. I am constantly telling them about new Israeli companies that I've learned about, and they're like, what? And then they tell me about 15 more that I need to go look at. So that's probably one of the best ways, because that extra level of validation and my network that I'm leaning on helps me really get excited about a certain technology and get that tagline of this is what you should be paying attention to and when.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I just want to tell you that in the chats, we have a lot of companies who are very interested in reaching out to you. And I was wondering if it's okay if I can share your contact information with the participants.
Absolutely. We'd love to at least look at the tech that you have, and if it's a good fit, we can set up a demo. That's our first step for interacting with any new startup or partner. Just a quick website read. If it looks interesting, we do a 30-minute demo. I bring in our technology generalists. They ask a bunch of really smart questions. And then the next steps after that would be connecting with our specific business unit that your technology might touch. And from there, we would either do a POC or become a customer. So those are the major ways that we start interacting with startups. And when you asked a question a couple minutes ago about what's my advice, that process can be super frustrating because that's something that you think just hearing it happens really quickly. That can sometimes take up to 6 months. And that goes back to, again, the size of the ship that we're steering. And while you guys are agile and nimble and can move quick, it can sometimes take me a month to find a time where I can get the right people in the room and make them and have them have the mental capacity to pay attention to your product. So that patience and that flexibility and just dedication to telling your story and making sure you're highlighting your project and your demo in the best light possible with that crisp, clear message that our friends Patrick and Alan were talking about earlier. That's so critical to success.
So I think from what I'm hearing is that one major role is really to spark the innovation within the utility and making sure that everybody else will be engaged. And I'm sure that, we all have our frustrations sometimes and also our success stories. Can you share with us one success story that you've been involved with that you're very proud of? If one of you can jump and share with us.
Absolutely. So we had a very successful proof of concept and rollout with a company called Ubiquia. They're a Florida-based company that specializes in 5G nodes. So with them, we designed a product that we can install on the top of our LED lights, and it will help us create private Wi-Fi networks. They're usually used for infrastructure-related stuff, but we did our first POC at our Juno Beach campus, and that went so successfully that it's now one of our product offerings to all of our smart city customers as our lighting sales guys go across the country to convert people from the non-LED lights to LED lights. And we infused a lot of cash into them in the process. We became a 30% owner of the company while allowing them to still retain the autonomy and ownership of that company. So they're hugely great partners with us. And that was probably one of my favorite success stories of interacting with a startup that we didn't actually acquire. That's always a good success story sometimes too for entrepreneurs, is their exit strategy. Very many times we'll buy a startup nuts to bolts. Nextera Analytics was WinLogix, and we bought them because we were using their software all of the time. And now they are one of the major companies that makes up our larger umbrella. So two success stories, I guess.
Very rewarding, I would say, as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Svea, any rewarding story you want to share with us?
Well, we've been around for only 1 year, but out of the 48 pilots that we've done, 4 are being implemented within the company. And so for me, it's not one story, but it is very rewarding because usually, we count the unimportant stuff in innovation because it's really difficult to understand what your KPIs are. But in this case, this is an important KPI because, well, more or less 10%, let's say 8% out of all the pilots that we have performed in 2020 were put into production, as they say in the software company, in 2021. So this is not just one story, but 4 different stories, and I'm sure you'd cut me in the next 15 seconds. So if anyone is interested, you're more than welcome to contact us later.
Yes, we will definitely put your contact information with your permissions and share it with the audience. I know there's quite a lot of interest in working, and it was mentioned already in the chat box. So Andrea, is there any questions that we may have missed that you want to ask the audience?
So there was one that was asked by one of the participants. I believe it was to any of the panelists. She asked how nuclear power will play a role in achieving net zero carbon goals, and will new assets be acquired, and on what timeline? So we're not typically involved at BIRD so much in the nuclear area, but I don't know if any one of the panelists can answer that question.
I guess this is Alan Etlinger from the New York Power Authority. We used to own and operate 2 nuclear plants, and we sold them about 15 or 20 years ago. I would say it's not a technical or economic issue right now in the United States. It's probably a political issue as much as anything else. So there are 1 or 2 nuclear plants that are being built, especially in the South. But in New York State, in fact, last week we just decommissioned one of our nuclear plants at Indian Point, a second unit there. So nuclear, while it solves a lot of the carbon-free issues, there's a lot of, I would say, political baggage that comes along with it. So I don't foresee in the next 10 to 15 years any new nuclear plants within New York State.
I'll chime in there because the units that are being built are ours. So we're actually building the first 2 nuclear units in the United States in 3 decades, which I can tell you, to Alan's point, is an extremely difficult process. The project is going relatively well. It's not without its challenges, but I think the point is, from a research perspective, is that the current cost of the existing nuclear fleet is untenable. We can't continue with building a nuclear fleet that is dependent on the technology of the light water reactors from decades ago. And so Southern Company is highly invested in advanced nuclear technologies, and we're looking at trying to address and solve all of the pitfalls along that path. So to your point about maybe some success stories is, Southern Company became a customer 5 years ago of a Bill Gates startup called TerraPower. That is an advanced reactor technology developer. We invested in a cost study of their molten chloride reactor technology, and subsequently in that partnership, another question in the chat was about, the conversation is how U.S. utilities are helping developers, but the reverse is absolutely true, is that these developers are helping us fill gaps. We see advanced nuclear as a key need. And so we went out searching for solutions to that. And by defining that needs gap as a part of our strategy, we surveyed the landscape of technologies that were available, and subsequently worked with TerraPower to help them win $40 million of DOE funding to scale up and begin testing of their technology. And that's probably, I agree with Alan, probably not going to be building any advanced nuclear in the next 10 years, but we're looking at the 2035, 2040 horizon of commercializing advanced nuclear. So, and maybe that brings it back full circle to another point, is how early is too early in commercialization. For us, if you're looking at this really long timeline of innovation, then we absolutely work with partners on a regular basis that are very conceptual in nature. And I think for us, the important thing is the quality of the idea, not necessarily the maturity of the development. If we test an idea and it fails, then hopefully we've learned something, and we've learned how to move forward from that position. So that's the important thing for us. Yeah,
that's the business of innovation. Well, thank you so much, all. I'm afraid we're running out of time, and although it is very engaging conversation, I promise to end this meeting on time. I want to thank you, Patrick, Kara, Tzvia, and Ellen for your participations. I want to thank all your participants. And especially, I want to thank you for your enthusiasm in promoting innovations and building models of partnerships. We have the ability of working with you, and it's always fascinating to have partners that are truly engaged and interested in learning about new companies and new solutions and new ideas. I want to thank our partner, Ignite the Spark, and I also want to invite you to follow their LinkedIn account where they organize events to promote energy corporations. We are going to continue organize more of these events in order to promote partnership between the energy ecosystem here in Israel and the United States. We try to respond to some of your questions, and if we weren't able to do that, we promise to contact you right after this meeting. I want to thank you all. Wish you stay safe, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Thanks.
And thank you, Limor, for leading Bird Energy from its inception
Thank you.
to new heights every year.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good evening, everyone.